Hello! Olá, pessoal. Meu nome é João Felipe, eu sou EducationUSA Advisor aqui no Brasil, em Mato Grosso, Cuiabá. E hoje nós estamos aqui com a Suzanne Abelnasser, da instituição Claremont Graduate University. Nós vamos conversar, ter um webinar com ela sobre How to Submit a High Quality Graduate School Application. Espero que todos tenham uma ótima sessão e no final teremos um espaço para as perguntas. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Suzanne Abelnasser, and today I'll be facilitating this graduate school, applying to graduate school and submitting a high quality application presentation. So let's get started. So for today's presentation, I will be going over some important things about what you have to do before you apply. What are the differences between the master's and the doctorate, putting your application, your best application forward. So we'll go over different areas of the application. And then we'll also talk about how to write an effective statement of purpose. And then at the end, we'll finish it off with utilizing your resources. So before you apply, there's a lot of work that needs to go into applying to graduate school. The first thing that I always recommend for every student is to research the programs and find the schools that are a good fit. Well, you might be asking yourself, how do I know what's a good fit? The easiest way to figure this out is to kind of write everything down, write everything you're looking for in your graduate education, and just write it on a paper and start looking at universities that fulfill that that criteria. For example, you might be interested in, I'm sorry, the Fleipe, the screen went green. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, it seems like part of the screen is covered by something green.
You can't read?
Yeah, it's covered by something green. It seems like it's covered by something green for our participant as well. Okay, now it's better. Okay, sorry about that. So yes, so exploring your fit. So you might be asking yourself, you know, how do I explore if a graduate institution is a good fit for me? The first thing you want to do is actually write down what you're looking for in your graduate experience. So some people might be looking for a more research degree. Some people might be looking for a more practical degree. So write down all of the things that you're looking for. Are you looking for a big school? Are you looking for a small school? Are you looking for a nationally recognized program? Are you looking for a very diverse program? So those are all really good things that you need to ask yourself before researching all of these different institutions. So really ask yourself, what am I looking for? Once you figure out what you're looking for, that's when you go into the research and you start figuring out, okay, this program's offering these types of classes and is for this long. That's you know, aligning with my professional goals. So that aspect, I think, is the most critical, the most important part of applying to graduate school is exploring that fit. The second thing you want to do is check on the deadlines and required materials. So for, you know, many institutions, they might have very typical deadline dates. So, you know, for fall semester, there's usually the deadlines don't differ, but there are institutions that are on a rolling admissions basis, such as Claremont Graduate University. So we do accept applications throughout the year. We have a fall start, a spring start, and a summer start. So you want to look at all of the different deadlines for every institution that you plan on applying to. You also want to look at what are the required materials, because you know, most schools will have the typical materials, which are, you know, letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, official transcripts. But other schools might require supplemental essays, a writing sample, an interview component. So you want to make sure that you're well prepared. So any institution that you're applying to, you want to look and see what are the required materials for this particular program. The third thing that you should focus on before you apply is studying and setting a date for any required exams. So for example, you know, some programs might require an MCAT. Some programs might require a GMAT or GRE or an LSAT. Or even some of our international students have to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. So you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success by studying and setting a date for these different exams. Oftentimes, from my experience, a lot of our students end up taking these exams more than once. So you really don't want to leave this to the last moment. The fourth thing that you need to do before you apply is identify individuals that can write letters of recommendation. So as you know, letters of rec can sometimes take some time because you are waiting on other people who have a busy life and other priorities. And so you want to make sure that you're giving your recommenders ample time. And you also want to make sure that your recommenders know you very well. So next slide, please. So now to look at, you know, a master's or a doctorate. So master's degree typically take anywhere between 1 to 3 years, and they're usually professionally focused. They're usually less research, but there are degrees that are research focused, but they're usually more applied. A master's degree can help you prepare for your next, you know, your career trajectory, but it can also help you prepare for doctoral programs. And a doctoral degree takes anywhere between 5 to 7 years. There are some cases in which doctoral degrees can be finished sooner, but most of the time, that's the time frame for a doctoral degree. And usually for doctorate degrees, it's usually a little more research focused, research intensive. So there are some doctorate degrees that are practical, but most degrees are research focused. But make sure that you're doing your research on which doctoral degree that you're applying to. The doctoral degree helps you prepare for research, applied, and academic careers. So if you get a doctorate degree, you don't have to stay in academia. You can always go into the industry as well. Next slide, please. So putting your best application forward. So right now we're going to go over some key components of the application. Next slide, please. So just some general components of a graduate application. And again, there could be additional materials depending on the program, but typically the application materials that we see in most schools is official transcripts, test scores. So that could be the GRE or the GMAT, resumes or CV, a statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, and sometimes an interview component. Next slide, please. So most of you might be thinking, you know, what do I have to think about when, I submit GPA and test scores? So one thing I would recommend is asking your admissions representative, is this going to be a holistic admissions, or is this, or are you looking for specific GPA requirements for this program? For our program in specific, we do have a holistic admissions process. So we are looking at everything from the GPA to the letters of recommendation, to your statement of purpose, to your test scores, everything, in order to make that decision. So what holistic admissions really means is there's not one thing in your application that is gonna make you not get accepted into the program. We look at everything in order to make that decision. And so sometimes not having the strongest GPA, it might not completely hurt you just because if you do apply to a program that has a holistic admissions process, they're looking at everything from your test scores, your GPA, your letters of recommendation. So if you do feel scared, just know that there are programs out there that don't just look at the test score and the GPA. Certain things that you should know about the tests is you shouldn't take it lightly. Oftentimes, schools that make you take a test, they're looking for certain things. Sometimes, you might be applying to a quantitative degree where the GRE scores in the quantitative area is really important. So you want to make sure that you're studying hard for these, that you've prepped enough, that you've set the date, and that you've set a good time frame in order to complete everything. The second thing is you should always consult your admissions office to see how does the school even do admissions? Is it holistic? Is it not? Do they have strict guidelines? Always consult the admissions representative. Another thing that always comes up personally for me is, can I take the GRE or the GMAT? A lot of universities actually accept either or, but you, again, have to ask your admissions representative, and you should also ask if the test is optional, because sometimes there are opportunities for students to waive out of those exams. Next slide, please. So for your resume, you're gonna want to include a lot of things that you've done outside of the classroom. So many of our students, especially students that are applying for doctorate degrees, they need to show some sort of research experience. So anything you put on your resume can really help you in the admissions process, especially if it's going through a holistic review. So if you have research projects, research experience, internships, professional experience, publications, any type of honors, academic or professional, or any specialized skills, you're gonna want to put that on your resume, because again, that is going to help the review committee come to a decision on whether or not they want to admit you into the program based off of your specialized skills and some of the experiences you've had. So make sure to include those. Next slide, please. For letters of recommendation, this is a really, it's a really good topic, specifically because I think there's a huge misconception. I think a lot of times when people apply to graduate school, they just, they ask a couple of people, can you write a letter of recommendation? And they feel like as long as we have a letter of recommendation on file, everything should be fine. The truth is, you're gonna want to do a couple of things before you ask someone to write your letter of rec. The first thing you wanna do is identify a few key people that you want to write your letter of recommendation, and you're going to ask them, are you comfortable writing a strong letter of recommendation for me? And always give people an out. So tell them, if you're not comfortable, that's completely fine. I can ask someone else. The reason I always tell my applicants this is because you want to make sure that you don't get someone to write a letter of recommendation that's very generic. That's actually going to hurt you more than help you in the admissions process. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So when you ask people, are you comfortable writing a strong letter of recommendation? It really eliminates that element of the potential that someone might write you a generic letter of recommendation. So when people ask me the question, who should you ask to write the letter of recommendation? Should it be all academic? Should it be all professional? I always recommend go with whoever's going to write you the strongest letter. So if you've disconnected with many of your professors and you have a lot of professional connections and a lot of people in the professional sphere that can write you a letter of rec, then go that route. Because it's much better to get a good letter of recommendation than to get a generic letter of recommendation. So that's just something that I think is extremely important to think about when you're asking people to write your letter of recommendation. Another thing you should know for this slide is You're going to want to also ask your admissions staff, is it okay if I have 3 letters of recommendation that are professional instead of having a mix? Because some programs might really want to see a mix of both academic and professional, but other programs might not mind. They might just be looking for any letter of recommendation. So just some tips on what the letters of recommendation should cover. It should speak to your work ethic, it should speak to your collaborative nature, and it should speak to your ingenuity. In terms of, okay, what if that person doesn't really know me in that way, but they've worked with me in some aspect? You can always give your recommenders your resume, or even tell them, hey, I know we haven't connected in a long time, but these are some of the things that I've been doing recently. Here are some internships. Here are some awards I've just recently won. These are all great things that you want your recommender to know so that they could include it in the letters of recommendation. Next slide, please. For the interview, so some programs, a lot of programs actually don't require an interview, but some programs might require it. So, so really you want to think about the interview as, what can I share about myself that's not already shared in the statement of purpose or resume? So you want to highlight some things about yourself. The way to prepare for it is, to be prompt. So make sure that you're on time to the interview. First impressions matter. Be concise. Make sure you're not rambling. Make sure that you're in a good state of mind before you go into the interview. And lastly, be relaxed. We want to know you as an individual. And so it's going to be very difficult to do that if you're on edge. So the best thing is just treat it like a conversation. You're talking with someone and telling them of your interest. You're telling them about some of the things that you've done. They might ask you questions regarding values and ethics and stuff regarding the school. So make sure you've done your research about the institution so that when you get that interview, you know exactly what you need to say and that you can make the connections between you as an individual and the institution you're applying to. Next slide, please. So how to write an effective statement of purpose. So the first thing that I always recommend is read the prompt carefully. Sometimes we have students applying to many schools. They take, one essay they wrote for another school and they refurbish it and they send it out to all the other schools. And sometimes that could work, but a lot of times it might not work because a lot of schools have different prompts and they want you to address certain things. And so it's really important that you know exactly what they're asking before sending something in. So read that carefully. I cannot stress it enough. You would be surprised how many things I've personally seen in admissions regarding statements of purpose. The second thing is you need to know, what are you going to cover? So if the prompt is vague, then you're going to want to kind of share your story. So what sparked your interest in this particular field? What do you plan on doing long-term? And how can that school help you achieve those goals? So in other words, why is this school the school of your choice? That's kind of, the last question is kind of to show some alignment between the institution and you yourself as an applicant. I find that when you separate the statement of purpose into 3 different questions and then answer them like that, it makes it a lot easier to put the statement of purpose together. But again, make sure that you're looking at the prompt before answering it, because the prompt can be very specific at times. Another thing is the statement of purpose can be an opportunity to address any weak areas in your application. For me personally, I think maybe because our admission cycle is a little bit different, I don't recommend to my students address any weakness in their application in the statement of purpose, I actually tell them to write a supplemental paper addressing that, so that when we review the application, they can actually see, you know, a section on any problems or difficulties or challenges that they've had that has impacted their application. I would rather that than the statement of purpose, but some schools will want you to address it in the statement of purpose. So make sure you're reading the directions before addressing those weaknesses on your statement of purpose. Lastly, you're going to want to read, review, edit, and read again, and review and edit. You're going to want to send your statement of purpose to a couple of people, trusted people. You want people who are extremely honest and not afraid to hurt your feelings, because that's what you need in a statement of purpose. You need someone to tell you, this isn't working, this is okay, this is not okay. And you need to continue to read and review it and edit it. I would also recommend not to have your statement of purpose sent to too many people, because everyone has a different writing style. And if you send it out to so many people, you'll have a lot of conflicting edits. So just make sure that you have one or two people that are trusted, trusted and will tell you what you need to hear to get the job done in a good way. So those are the tips for the statement of purpose. Next slide, please. So utilizing your resources. Next slide. So this is really just a section on, you know, don't be afraid to request information from the institution or to request to speak to someone from the institution. You know, graduate education is it's a time investment. It's also a financial investment. So you want to make sure you feel good about your decision before you join a program. And that means doing your homework. So researching the school. That means connecting with various offices in that school. That means maybe asking to sit in a class, to preview a class. It means talking to faculty. It means, you know, joining different events. That's going to be critical to really finding that fit and being happy with the choice that you made. So that's the first thing. If you have an opportunity to visit campus, you should definitely do that. And if you have trouble with the admissions process in general, you need to be reaching out to admissions representatives to get answers. So that's basically all of the tips that I have for you. And now we can open it up for Q&A, and the next slide should have my information if anyone wants to connect after. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It was an amazing session with you. I really enjoy it. Actually, I have some questions, but I need to check the chat box. Do you want to see the chat box? Because for me, it's difficult because I'm sharing the screen. If you want to take a look on the chat box, are there questions?
There are no questions in the chat box as of now.
Okay, so I can ask you a question because I'm working with advising sessions, and when you talk about the interviews, and I have two students that they are applying for US universities, and due the COVID, they are not going to do the exams in the in-personal centers, you know, so they will have some interviews. And we were talking about some tips to have a better interview. And I really enjoyed your tips here. Be prompt, be concise, be relaxed. And I can also add, be yourself, you know, because some people, they are trying to be another person, and you need to be who you are, you know. So what do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the interview component, I think the biggest thing is you need to address why you're interested in this particular program, and where do you see alignment between you and this program. So for example, I actually studied at CGU. I did the master's in business administration. So I did an MBA there. And I went through an interview process. And one of the things that I liked about the Drucker School was they have like a high emphasis in, you know, being a leader, but also social responsibility. And what are the social contributions you're going to do in the world? You know, once you finish this program. And to me, that was something that that was personally aligning with my values and my goals and what I want to put in to the world in the future or even now. So, so really understanding why this particular program, and make sure it speaks, you know, from the heart. You don't want something generic like, oh, I really like this program because the career opportunities will be amazing after. You don't want any of those very simple, superficial answers. You want the details about that program. You know, I like that it's a small class environment. I like that, you know, we'll have professionals in the field teaching the courses. Those are things that you want to talk about. It shows your research and your dedication to that program, and it will help you throughout the interview. But most importantly, I mean, different programs will ask you different questions. Like a business program might ask you about something having to do with ethics or something having to do with collaboration. When I was in my program, when I was interviewing in the admissions process, they asked me questions about, you know, can you talk about a time where something unethical was happening in your work environment and you had to speak up? What happened and what did you say and what was the issue? You know what I mean? So they ask you about personal experiences. So have a couple of examples on hand. To prep for the interview, I would have a whole list of what are some of the things that I'm most proud about. What are some of the things that I've accomplished that I'm most proud about? Where is the alignment between me and the university? I would think about things having to do with the mission of that program, you know, is really important. So I would read the mission and see, you know, they'll probably ask you a question having to do with the mission and the values of the university. That's for sure something that they typically ask in interviews. So I would just do your research. Don't be nervous. Be yourself, like you said. You know, bring the energy and just be concise. Don't babble too much. It's just not going to make you look good, you know? And the only way to not babble is to be prepared to begin with, right? So.
Thanks a lot. Okay, Areta, go ahead. Areta, your mic is off. Open your mic. Areta, we can't listen to you. Open again your mic.
Okay, yes, okay, I was waiting for you to unmute me. Yeah, because as a host, I think you had the power. Okay, Suzanne, okay, my name is Areta. I'm an EducationUSA advisor based in Curitiba, south of Brazil. And currently, coincidentally, I am advising a student on PhD in musicology. And you have a good program. You know, the problem that we are facing, the guy, you know, although he's only 26, he's so knowledgeable, he has done so much, and he's interested in composition. So we are struggling because, you know, we have to narrow down the statement of purpose, his statement of purpose. So what recommendations, for example, what is something that is consistent, for example, in his application? Do you think that he should strengthen? Because excuse me. What is consistent in his application? What do you think that he should reinforce in his statement to become, you know, just like to stand out, to stand better chances to be considering, you know, his expertise? because he has done an undergraduate studies. He's doing a master's degree in composition, but he is also, he has traveled, he has experimented with different music instruments.
So, I mean, I don't, because I haven't seen the actual application, it's kind of hard. I'll be giving kind of blind advice, but I would say, you know, it's good to talk about the story. So like, what is your story with music? How did that come to be? What interested you? Like, it's always good when you're applying to a program to kind of create this narrative, this story of why, what sparked this interest to begin with. And it's usually a very interesting story. And through that story, you can kind of talk about all of the accomplishments and all of the things that you're doing thus far in order to accomplish this greater goal. So like, for example, if, you know, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about that particular program or musicology. I just don't, to be frank. But in any of our programs, like for public health, I'm a public health representative. My students always focus on, you know, what sparked their interest. And the story is actually so unique and interesting. Some of these people came from marginalized backgrounds. Some of these people, their interests came up through tragedy, and it kind of led through their whole life trajectory. You know, this thing led to this thing, and then, you know, it led to this person getting their master's, and from that happened. And there is so many strategic ways of highlighting that story, plus all of his accomplishments and where he is at this moment and why he wants to apply for this degree. That once you map it out into the story form and show how the story started here, and it was, you know, after my undergrad, I realized that, you know, this was something I wanted to do in the long term. It could be even a bigger thing that happened after undergrad that led to the master's. And through the master's, these are all the discoveries. These are all the things that you notice that are leading now to why you want to do the PhD. So I think that focusing on a story of why all of this stuff is happening is really interesting and will really draw in the reviewers. And then lastly, you want to focus on, you know, how can the institution help you achieve your goals? And that's an opportunity for the student to show where there's alignment between the program and the university. So, you know, you could mention something regarding faculty or something regarding the core values of the institution. There's so many things. You just have to find similarities and talk about those. But more importantly, if he's applying to this program at CGU, my biggest advice, and the biggest advice you could give him, is to connect with David Altman, the admissions representative for that program, because David could even give him better tips, more specific to what the faculty are looking for. I hope they answered your question. And I hope it wasn't too generic.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You answered the question. Yes, I have already taken notes. My next session with him is on Friday. So we have time to, you know, work on the statement. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect, perfect. And I'll put, if you want, I can put David Altman's email, david.altman cgu.edu. That's his email address. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, go on the website and you can actually find his email address and his phone number on the website. And he'd be more than happy to connect with you and give you detailed information.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aretha. And sorry for the mic. I forgot that I was the host. Okay, sorry. Suzanne, I have a question to you about the letters of recommendation. And I want to just add that when I have a student, an advisee, I usually say, oh, you should ask your teacher to recommend you because your teacher knows you better than the principal or another person from the school, you know, teacher or professor, of course.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed what you said, what they should cover, work ethic, collaboration. This is so interesting. It's an insight for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I think a lot of students think, oh, I need to get a letter of recommendation from my teacher. But honestly, sometimes getting the letter of recommendation from a teacher that doesn't know you that well might not help you because they might write a very generic letter. But if you have to get it from a teacher or a professor, then make sure, you know, you give them something to work with too. So they're not writing, oh, this student was a good student in my class, I would recommend them. You don't want something generic. It's not going to help the student. It's like, it's just defeating. Honestly, that's what it is. When you submit a letter of recommendation and it's a generic letter, it just hurts them. I think the biggest takeaway from that is asking people if they're comfortable writing a strong letter of recommendation, and always give people an out. That's, I always, in every presentation, I always mention this particular point because it's extremely critical to the success of that applicant.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think we don't have more questions. Yes, we have no more questions here. But there is something that you want to add, Suzanne, before we close the session? Is there something that you want to highlight?
Something I would want to highlight from this presentation is, it's going to be very basic, but most important, explore your fit. Know what you're looking for. Remember, you're spending time and money. Time is something you can never, once you give it away, you can never take it back. So if you're going to be spending this time and your money, you want to make sure that the institution you choose is the right institution for you, is something that is going to bring you joy, that's going to challenge you. So do your research. That's the most important thing. And ask yourself, what am I looking for in my experience? What am I looking for in my experience? So that's one big highlight. The second big highlight is read the directions. Read the directions for the application, because you will automatically, I know schools, some schools won't even look at your application if they see that you did one thing wrong on the application. One thing. So so the basics, I mean, as someone mentioned right here, you know, the basics are so important. It's so true. Read the directions. Make sure you know when the deadlines are and what materials you need to submit, and be organized when you're applying to grad school. Put it on a Excel sheet and say, okay, I'm applying to 10 schools. Here's the status. I have all of my transcripts sent to the school. You know, I have my recommenders for these schools. I know what the deadlines are. This school has a different prompt than this school. This school has an additional required material that this school doesn't have. Like, make sure to stay organized, follow the directions, and make the right choice for yourself. Okay? So that's my big takeaway. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Happy to do it again. And I wish everyone luck in their future endeavors. Thank you.